Oh, just to review, who was lynched in until 1955, and why was this different than other lynchings? Yeah, the media, the TV, this is TV. Where was the bus boycott? That's Montgomery. And who would not give up their seat and got arrested? Why was it a big deal? Such a big deal, got arrested. And so made his way to the Supreme Court. Who would become one of the leaders of the boycott, only 26 years old? Yes. And lastly, what high school would be the first one to be? And why they choose that school? And they wanted integration to what? Yeah, did to fit. And yeah, all kinds of new schools will pop up called private schools will pop up called segregation academies, purely for white kids. It's private schools. I mean, it's all going to pop up. All this will become a big deal by the 1970s. So we got Red Scare. We got Truman elected.
We got to Red China.
So we're all the way here. Very good. Red China, bad China. And do we mention anything about today? Is that we just literally got there and so the U.S. never had an embassy, didn't recognize China. Did I tell you that? All the way until 1979, the U.S. did not recognize the People's Republic of China. And when I was a kid, it was always Red China. The most populous country in the world at that time was a country. Taiwan got China's seat in the United Nations and China's seat in the Security Council that makes all the difficult decisions. And we just assumed that this was Stalin winning, even though Stalin and Mao didn't like each other. And in 1979, the U.S. just shut the doors in Taipei. No more embassy there. Now there's only we do not formally recognize Taiwan as a country, and they moved it to Beijing. Because the People's Republic of China will not allow anybody to recognize Taiwan as a country, or there will be repercussions. They are furious about that. And they are threatening every once in a while to forcibly reunify the two Chinas. And so that all started right here. Chiang Kai-shek would be the dictator of Taiwan until 1974 when he passed away. So in the United States, almost immediately the cry went out over and over again, who lost China? Who lost China? The idea was that somehow the United States should have done something. And remember, the U.S. sent weapons to Greece. The Truman Doctrine made it a big deal that we had to stop communism everywhere. And now they let China fall. And you can imagine who this is going to hit. The party in power. By the way, they despised each other. I think that picture's kind of funny. You can almost feel the hatred radiating off them each other. But we just assume one and the same. And the spreading communism. Democrats are going to be blamed. Truman and the Democrats will be blamed for losing China. It's going to be a political hit that the Democrats never really recovered from. And for domestic politics, now they must look tough. And tough means weapons. So a couple things about this. The red and blue map, constant maps, and now the growing red blob. By the way, the Mercator projection, really accurate, isn't it? Really accurate. And Mao said the revolution would hatch. The revolutions would hatch all over the world like a million locusts. So the red. And so now the communists were winning. And this led to a collective freakout in the United States. The House Un-American Activities Committee was created back in the 1930s to stop fascists. But now it went looking for communists. And even though Democrats controlled Congress, Republicans on the committee, especially a young member of Congress by the name of Richard Nixon, would use this as a way for Republicans to attack Democrats. They would bring people up and try to find out if they're communists. But the big thing is, it was a way to attack Democrats. But the special target of mostly Republicans, but some Democrats on HUAC was Hollywood, implying that the media was polluting the youth. And I got to do some polluting them. And they brought many members of, or many members of this kind of Hollywood elite to HUAC. I have to write something up here really quick. And this was a made up thing like Red Clown, communist organization, just totally made up. And one after one, they would be called up. And the big thing was they were accused. And there were a few that were fellow travelers who did kind of toy, like go into a few socialist meetings in the 1930s. Most of them were just, they weren't. But they say, well, you're a Democrat, you must be a communist. That's how they got after them. And then they had to name names. Okay, you're not a communist? Well, then name names. Tell us who is a communist. And if they won't name names, they'd be put on a blacklist. And over 1,000 screenwriters, directors, and some actors would either never work again or not work for over a decade, as they would be blacklisted. And virtually none of them have any association with a communist party, or certainly not espionage. Here are some of the most famous actors in America at that time. In fact, probably the most famous actor in America at a HUAC hearing in 1949, Humphrey Bogart. Best known for probably the greatest movie ever made, Casablanca, His Wife Lauren Bacall, Danny Kaye. A lot of actors would be accused of this. And so you have this like searching for, there must be communists all over. And then Joe McCarthy. Joe McCarthy, just a few months after Mao Zedong and the communists won in China, would make accusations directly attacking Democrats in charge of government. And this would turn into an absolute spree where he attacked the Democrats and this educated elite that were maybe like in colleges or professors teaching people to be communists. And he began to accuse hundreds of people without any proof at all. And a ghostwriter would write this book, McCarthyism. So make sure you get down the word McCarthyism, and that equals a second Red Scare. And this would be one of the most volatile times in American history. So I really like the 50s, that series, The Rage Within. So I'm going to show you just a little bit of a clip of what they do on McCarthy, because I think they do a good job. And they do it with a little bit of humor, where they show what kind of person he was and how amazing it was that he became the symbol of this fight against communism. And cannot forget, they don't say it here, but you're going to have the Truman Doctrine, people are freaking out about communism, the Berlin airlift that just happened, and then Joe won, then Chinese communism, and the country was ready, convinced that there's spies everywhere. There'll be a couple of things you want to have to write down for this. Delete. Remember Yalta? He's a really famous reporter. That's Sandlot. Okay. Wheeling, West Virginia. Just a little tour. So that's what you gotta get. McCarthy came out and just said 205. In fact, what he said was, I hold in my hand a piece of paper with a list of 205 communists that are running the State Department. And since Truman's a Democrat, he's attacking Democrats. Pretty important list, huh? The list was actually a betting form for illegal off-track horse betting. That's what he was holding. He just came out and said it. Plan. And because if Joe won, people were willing to believe it. Oh my God, there want to be spies everywhere. An enemy within. Now it's 57. He was probably drunk. This is pretty funny. Yeah, you gotta report this, huh? So we had no evidence, you just named it names. Autographs. He was a big celebrity. Van Bale. The drinking. Wow. That's a lot. So they would report accusations and they got big. Just report. Front page. He understood the concept of the big lie. Just say it and it sticks, even when it's proven to be not true. Because virtually every single person he accused
had no connection at all to communism. Didn't matter. Didn't matter. Their career would be ruined. And one is drinking. I love that line. Sorry. He was just good for fame. It's fun. Fairly made up. Untouchable. Basically true. One example of hundreds. Every expert on China would be run out of the State Department. The US is about to go to full-scale war with China and have no idea. Worked. accusing the Milwaukee Baker of being communist. This is a good point. This is what he makes. Works. Our final one second. His liver exploded. It was about 5 times the size of a normal liver. Alcohol. He was drinking about a fifth of whiskey a day, or I'm sorry, a fifth of brandy a day, they say. That's a lot. Oh, what's a lot? That's a lot. Okay. So they just went over this part really quick. The Korea War is going on. And here's the big, there was an election, and he helped the Republican get elected president. Who was it? Eisenhower, Ike. But McCarthy never realized that. Oops. Oh, wait. He kept attacking Ike. Republicans were like, shut up now. We got a Republican as president. He kept doing it. And so he went after the army in 1954. Who's commander in chief? Eisenhower, a Republican. And they were unfounded, silly claims with obviously cut and paste photographs. And that would lead to his censure and his fallout, which happened really fast because even Republicans who had liked him at first, fellow Republicans, had had enough. And Democrats got a little bit of guts and finally also went against them. But the Red Scare still continued, as this one of showing the Committee on Un-American Activities, CUAC, just blazing through the street. And then look at that Russian bear. They could be anywhere. Hey, so part of the thing, these all connect. Where you have McCarthyism beginning, CUAC, Joe One, spies all over, and now war. So Korea was a Japanese colony. After World War II, they divided it like Germany, literally just put a line, Russia, United States, and sometime down the road they would pull out. But like what's happening in Germany by 1949, both sides realized they're not going to leave. And so in the north, the United States left, or did I say the United States? I'm sorry, the Soviets left the real deal. A tough dictator who was a fighter. He had fought the guerrilla forces against the Japanese, trained in Russia, Kim Il-sung, and left him an army, and he had fought with over 100 tanks, good Soviet T-34 tanks. On the south, the United States left Sigmund Rhee, who would be a dictator too. He didn't have any popular support. He had been in exile outside of Korea for years. They brought him back because of his anti-Japanese support. In 49, they just implanted him as dictator. Always, we're going to have a democracy someday. There would be a democracy in Korea for another 35 years. Not very vibrant democracy, but not for a long time. And he had no popular support. The US left him with very little. There was a small army, but it was not much more than a police force. And so that is the situation. Okay, Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea now, that's his friends. So even though they claim to be communist, it's a hereditary totalitarian military state. Well, surprising everybody, on June 25th, 1950, the North attacked the South. They're going to unify Korea. They're going to unify Korea. And it was a rout. South Korea didn't really have a force. The North Korean tanks went right through them. Seoul is really close to the border, so that was taken quickly. And South Korean forces are in full-scale retreat. Well, back in Washington, D.C., Truman heard this and immediately, oh no, we already just had China. What do we do now? Is the domino theory correct? China, Korea, is Japan next? Then the United States. So Truman, without a declaration of war, without consulting Congress, commits U.S. forces. And the big reason, of course, Truman Doctrine. Because and then also what happened in 49. But don't forget, just a few months, 4 months before, that's when McCarthy gave his speech. And everyone is now freaking out about communists all over. So Truman feels he has no choice. Here he is at the press conference. And ordered troops there, and and the American troops, they were in occupation duty in Japan, and that was pretty cushy duty, and they were literally just sent over real quick without any heavy equipment at all. The assumption was they'll easily stop the North Koreans. These are American forces. No heavy equipment to stop tanks. Now, as they're talking to Truman, who is not, notice this is outside the bounds of the power of the presidency to send troops. Only Congress can declare war. So reporters were asking him, is this a war? Is this a war? And he refused to say this is a war. And so finally, an exasperated reporter said, well, is it a police action? Because North Korea is doing an illegal act. And Truman said, yeah, it's a police action. And for the rest of the war, this is going to be the dark joke, the police action. And if you ever paid attention to President Trump after the United States and Israel attacked Iran, he would keep bouncing around saying, it's not a war, it's not a war, then say it was a war, then it's not a war. Why? For very similar reasons. And also set the precedent. No declaration of war since World War II. So, one more thing, the United Nations had just started. And so the United States was going to take this to the United Nations to say that this is collective security and that the countries of the world stop aggression. And they had a window because the United Nations would actually lead the forces. Now, how could they do that? Well, everything goes through the Security Council. That's the most important body. At this time, 11 members, 5 permanent. The Soviets have a veto. They would have vetoed any UN action, but the Soviets were boycotting over the People's Republic of China not being the UN. And this is a big deal for a few reasons. First off, therefore, all forces, US, South Korean, and other countries, Britain sent some troops, Canada sent some troops, Luxembourg sent like 100. All these troops, they sent troops, but technically they were under United Nations flag because the Soviets were not there. But here's the other thing. Truman Doctrine thinking was that North Korea must be following the orders of Stalin. All communists are the same. We know that's not true. Stalin was taken by surprise just as much as the Americans. We know that for a fact now, but they should have known then because the Soviets would have ended their boycott and been in the United Nations if they knew Kim Il-sung was going to attack. Stalin didn't know. Now, for Cold War political reasons, the Soviets would aid North Korea and even send fighter pilots for the North Korean Air Force. But they did not order this attack. And now they're kind of stuck with it too. General Douglas MacArthur, 5-star general, the guy who accepted the Japanese surrender, commanded the US forces in the Southwest Pacific, he took command. And he was already in his early 70s, but he refused to retire, or for that matter, go home. He hasn't been in the US since the 1930s. Here's MacArthur right there, MacArthur right there. So, the first US forces arrived, no heavy equipment, and near Daejeon, they were routed. They tried to stop North Korean tanks, and there was a wounded American soldier, and they ran right through. And it was just a pell-mell retreat, an absolutely embarrassing defeat, and the communists can't be stopped. The assumption was Korea is going to fall. But the remaining tiny little group of US forces and South Korean forces went here. It's called the Pusan Perimeter. There's a harbor right here called Pusan, right here, just holding out right there. And North Korean supplies became too stretched and they had to stop the attack. And that's the only thing that saved the US and South Korean forces. So, humiliating defeat. And Truman would like to say that Korea points like a dagger at Japan for the next target. They really talk about, are we going to have to pull these troops out? Then what do we do? So the United States is mobilizing reserves. Now, one thing as I mentioned before, when you're in the military, if any of you sign up in the military, no matter how long your hitch might be in for 4 years, you think, well, they got you for 8. And they can call you back even when you have been have been mustered out. They can call you back. And they started calling back all of these draftees who were drafted late in the war, 44, 45, because we needed soldiers right away. So, for example, my wife's grandfather was in the Navy, and he had certain skills they wanted, and so they called him out of his home in Phillipsburg, and he was in the Navy. In 3 days, he was back in uniform on an aircraft carrier going across the Pacific. Now, as it turned out, my wife's aunt was born, and so they decided, since he had 4 kids, they'd let him come back. But this happened all over. Thousands of men were called back. The most famous would be maybe the greatest hitter in Major League Baseball history. Was a fighter pilot named Ted Williams. He was for the Boston Red Sox, and they called him out in the middle of the season. Some of you might know who Ted Williams was, a fantastic player. So they just called everyone back. These reinforcements arrived, and last thing for today. What MacArthur decided to do was land these troops behind enemy lines at the harbor city for Seoul called Incheon, right here. Here's the Pusan perimeter, land the reinforcements there. Everyone said it wouldn't work. They didn't really have a beach. The tides were horrible. It's muddy. There's a big seawall that they would have to use a ladder to get over. Finish about that. How
Wait, that was so. I can read the activation. What? Yeah, I don't know, it's a.
Bill?